Right, okay, I think we're on. Atheist Experience starts in a couple of minutes. I'd like to make a quick comment before we start, which is I've just been watching The West Wing. If anybody hasn't seen The West Wing, then I would suggest that if you have an interest in America, if you have an interest in politics, or just really good TV, then you should be watching The West Wing. It's an amazing series. It's not being made anymore, but it's incredible. I've just watched episode 3 of season 2. At the end of season 1, there was a gun attack against the president, and a lot of people kind of were fired at. And it's kind of the aftermath at the beginning of season 2. And it's just an interesting episode, season 3, which basically has a moral, if you like, I think, which is that if you're too close to something, if you're too personally involved in something, then be very careful about the position that you take when it comes to taking a moral position. Because sometimes your morals go out of the window when you have a personal investment. It's sometimes a good thing when something is too personal to step back and let other people deal with issues. This can happen with parents when it comes to anything to do with their children. If a child is not happy at school, as a parent, back off a little bit, let the school work it out with the child, don't get involved. But it can be all sorts of things in life. Very often if you have children, it always comes down to your children. But basically, if you think that something is really, really important to you and you end up getting personally involved in a big way and something serious happens, then just relax, think about things before you jump in. Don't get too emotional. Try to stay not impartial, because you obviously have a vested interest, but try to remain calm and be sensible and rational when you discuss or argue with people. Don't let emotion take control.
So you think that you can tell us how to live out.
Okay, I'm not going to pause there, but I am going to mute that for a second, because I'd just like to say the timing of that was perfect, literally to the second. Okay, so let's get into the Atheist Experience, and as ever, what I will do is when we listen to the people that phone in, we'll have an opportunity. If anybody wants to chill out, we'll have an opportunity to relax, watch it, and then I'll pause it, and anybody that wants to, that's kind of in the chat, can make a comment and we can discuss it briefly before we move on to the next one. Let's get this going. There you go.
Co-host Shanna Q. Hello.
Hi!
These two should be amazing.
I'm actually feeling really badly today, but getting better.
No.
Yeah, we made adjustments to my meds, and my stomach is not liking the new meds, but I don't care.
Oh, no.
There's a show to do.
I'm not sure why Matt is
I
ill,
appreciate you
but
powering
this is not
through
good,
this.
and Shannon is lovely.
Thank you.
But I want to make sure we get the announcements out of the way, and we will get on to calls as quickly as possible. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. If you're watching us live on YouTube, directly below the YouTube chat, there's a little link there where you can click on donate. That's one of the many ways
If you
that
want
you
to
can
comment
support the
in the
Atheist Community
chat,
of Austin,
then please say
and the
hello,
Atheist Experience
maybe. That would be nice.
Overall, in addition to the donation
As ever,
link down
I'm
below,
cold.
there's also
Always
merchandise that you can purchase at
But not of heart.
bit.ly/AEN merch, and you can get your coffee cups and t-shirts and hoodies and all kinds of wonderful stuff there. And you can also become a member on YouTube, which will get you access to special icons, and also patreon.com/the Atheist Experience. All of those are the ways that you can support us directly financially. But the best way that you can support us is to click subscribe and like on this video and share this with your friends. If you've got theists in your family that think that they, it's silly of you to be an atheist and they think it's all a waste of time and they can prove they're God, have them call in. Because quite honestly, in 16 years, I'm starting to think I've run through all the theists on the planet. And
Everyone, eh? All of them.
All of them. Yeah.
All of them.
I mean, I could be wrong.
It's not the theists so much, to be honest, as the arguments.
If you want to have call in, please do. But if you want to participate outside of that, not only can you be engaged in the chat right now as we're live. But there are a couple of Facebook groups that we like to promote for people, and that is the Atheist Experience private, or sorry, the Atheist Experience fan group and then the Atheist Experience private fan group, both of which are on Facebook. And you can go there and fill out your application and become a secret serving member of the not quite Illuminati.
If you're watching this in UK, I'm sorry it's so late.
It's so strange the number of conspiracy theories that people roll up into one to try to accuse us
in the chat box,
of being awful.
In the comments.
But the Atheist Experience is one show on a broader network, the Atheist Experience Network, which is produced by the Atheist Community of Austin. And if you want to check out the other shows, first of all, not only did you get to see Talk Heathen earlier today with Objectively Dan and J Mike, you can also watch Objectively Dan's show Truth Wanted on Friday nights. And in between Talk Heathen and Atheist Experience, you can watch The Nonprofits, which is Sundays at 3 o'clock, new hosts, new segments. And on Thursdays, we've got Secular Sexuality out there for all of you so that you can get your freak on and do it responsibly, ethically, and within the bounds of humanism and learn all the things that you wanted to know about sex, but were terrified to ask because religion fucked you up for good. And if you want to find out about all these shows as podcasts, you can go to tiny.cc/AEN podcast. It's the one-stop destination for all the Atheist Experience Network shows as audio-only podcasts. So if you like Atheist Experience, but you aren't familiar with other shows, please go give them a listen. And at least there, you'll be able to check out everything that we're doing on a regular basis. We really appreciate the support and the interest. And once again, I'll remind you, for people who are like, oh, I can't afford to donate. Yes, I know tons of people like that, especially after a year of quarantine and everything else. Subscribing and letting people know about the content and getting people to call in, get your minister to call in, get your mom's minister to call in, get some YouTube.
Get your mom to call in.
It all works for us. How are you today, Shane?
I am good. I'm very good. I'm very excited to be here. It's been a minute. I'm excited to be back. And I see a call that we have to take first also.
We have one thing that I want to do before calls.
Okay.
Because Shannon and I need to hold our hands up in praise for the world's greatest crew on any show ever. So they can put themselves up and you can see all the people behind the scenes who are working hard to make this show happen. Because Shannon and I, we were talking about it on the phone just the other day. We are overjoyed that we are privileged to just show up on Sundays and talk. There are a lot of people who do a lot of work to make the show happen. We're a volunteer-run organization. Neither of us get paid for any of this, and never have, never will. And it's about the mission and seeing so many wonderful volunteers showing up to push forward on the mission and to be supportive and make sure that we can do a good show. I can't express how grateful I am and privileged we are. To just be able to talk to people.
Yeah, we're very, 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 very lucky. Like I say, I just show up and I put my butt in a chair and I talk to people. Real work happens behind the scenes on the Discord servers, in the live chats, on the production crew, the call screeners. All of those people are volunteers who are here and deserve all of the accolades. I am just a face with a mouth that goes on screen. So
it's almost wrong that I just get to do something I love this much,
right?
This often.
It is. It's not even fair.
But I also love doing it with Shannon, and Shannon is in control of the call machine today. I'm just going to sit back and let you steer and tell me what to say. Oh, no, I'm not a puppet. I'm not a puppet. She made me say that.
I did. There's one we have to take. We have to take Joe first. You promised. So we're going to talk to Joe.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, you promised.
I did.
Hi, Joe.
Hey, Sharon, how are you? Hi, Matt.
Hey, Joe, how you doing?
What would you like to talk about today?
How are you?
I'm okay. At some point, evidently, you thought I had been rude, and I figured, okay, have Joe call in and explain, and maybe we can fix it and be less rude.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think you've been probably one of the rudest people I've ever seen.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
In what way?
You've been rude?
To who?
Generally telling people to shut the fuck up and shut up about maybe hundreds of times. I don't know. That's kind of
well.
rude.
It depends. It depends, because if I ask someone a question, see, we're on a live show here, and there's, I don't know, half a dozen people or more waiting. And so if I ask someone a question and they're refusing to answer the question, aren't they being rude to us, everyone who's watching, and everybody who's on hold?
Look, dude, you can rationalize all you want, man. I would never tell you to shut the fuck up.
Well, see, that's your problem, because I'm just sitting here saying, look, I asked you a question, Joe. I asked you a question. Are those people?
You should
Are
not-
you being Joe? Are you being rude by now? Are you being rude right now? Because I asked you to call in to talk about this, and when I ask you a question, all you do is tell me that you wouldn't do that. Aren't you being rude by not answering the question?
I think you need to bully the bully, which is what you are.
But I'm not bullying anybody. I didn't make a call. You called us. You see, people call us, Joe. People call us, and I ask them to defend their belief. Why are you yelling at me, Joe?
How many people have you told to shut the fuck up?
Probably hundreds at this point.
Right.
What difference are you saying? Are you saying that there are no circumstances under which one person can say to another, "Shut the fuck up," without being rude?
Not no circumstances.
All right, shut the fuck up then. I'm rude. You win.
Huh?
You win. I'm rude. Fuck off. All right, Shannon, it's all you.
All right. Well, that was productive.
If you're going to say there's no circumstances under which you can say shut the fuck up and not be considered rude, then there's no argument for me to make. I just lost the argument. Congratulations, Joe. I am rude. I think it's justified sometimes and unjustified other times. And if Joe had had an example of when it was unjustified, we could have fixed that and addressed it. But
Joe was being a
thought it
dick
was
there.
best for him to come in and try and bully the bully. And how well did that work for you, Joe?
Yeah, the bully thing bothers me too. Like, I don't know. We'll move on to hopefully more productive conversations. We're gonna talk to Arnie. Hi, Arnie. What would you like to talk about?
I'll be
today?
back.
On the line with Shannon and Matt.
Annie.
Oh, awesome. Hey, I don't mean to pile on with Joe here. Basically, I wanted to pick up on a conversation that we left off on, and it was basically cut short because Matt didn't give a shit about the topic. And listening back, I think what happened is I didn't explain myself, so I'm not putting that on Matt. But I'd like to give a reason why you should give a shit about my topic. So
Okay.
the topic is Bible inerrancy is a form of idolatry, and basically, this isn't about like me. We were discussing an argument with a coworker, but that's not really what this is about. I had a Calvinist coworker that we were discussing whether or not the Bible is enough, basically, to divine, the truth of God. I was arguing, no, it's not, and the reason is because it's a form of claiming Bible inerrancy is a form of idolatry, not because it's some kind of accusation from one theist to another. This is bigger than that. It's the concept of reading the scripture and not recognizing that you are interpreting the scripture. So when someone says the Bible is inerrant, what they're really saying is my interpretation of the Bible is inerrant. Only the dangerous part is they're not seeing that their interpretation is even there. They're just able to see this, whatever it is their interpretation is of the Bible, and then imbue it with divine authority. So that's kind of my main point, is that it's a dangerous notion.
So I wouldn't disagree with you though. So I'm not sure. So you're saying that the Bible is just a book, and anybody who's reading that book is just doing an interpretation of what they read in that book. Therefore, there is no such thing as inerrancy because every interpretation is subjective. So I agree with you there. I don't know where I get to idolatry though, because without the book, how do you ground your faith in anything? That's where you're losing.
My primary objection, which is why I didn't care about it, is if you say it's a form of idolatry. Okay, I agree with you. It's a form of idolatry. So fucking what? Who says idolatry is wrong? Other theists. That's why I was pointing out this is an argument between them. I don't care if something is idolatrous. I don't care if somebody's worshiping an idol. I don't care if somebody's worshiping a false god. I don't care.
I agree.
Let him finish, Arnie.
All I was trying to do was finish the thought. But if you're just going to talk over me, go ahead. I'm done.
Well, sorry, I apologize. Proceed.
Well, don't do it.
I'm done.
Okay, so let's go 1 second, Arnie. Let's go back to what you were just saying. So you're saying that any interpretation of the Bible is idolatry, right? So there is no such thing as reading a scripture. No. So there is a way to read the Bible that is not idolatry.
Hang on.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? Let's get to that point.
Okay.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that claiming that the Bible is inerrant.
Okay.
That's where you get into trouble. Claiming the Bible is inerrant allows you to interpret it and not see that you're interpreting it. And so people can, and it's very dangerous. And that's why I think the reason that I think that it's a miscommunication between me and Matt is that I think he probably does care, because the way I would define idolatry is imbuing divine authority into a man-made construct.
That's not what idolatry means.
You go ahead, and then I want to explore this
That's
because
correct.
it's interesting.
If your real complaint,
Tell me what it means.
if your real complaint is that claiming Bible inerrancy is a problem, I fucking agree with you. I've agreed with you since I was a believer at 5. I've understood that's a problem. The point is, why call it idolatry? All idolatry is the worship of idols, the worship of potentially false gods, but it's admiration and love and respect for something. It has nothing to do with infallibility. So if your actual argument is that, hey, people who think the Bible is inerrant need to be educated, that their interpretation is being used there that isn't necessarily justified, then we completely agree. But it's not idolatry. And if it were idolatry, it doesn't fucking matter. Calling something idolatry is like calling something a cult. In some cases, it's like what the big church calls the little church. And so as an atheist, why would I care if someone was engaged in idolatry? If they were engaged in irrational understandings or unjustified beliefs, as a skeptic and humanist, that I care about. This is the problem. You're using the word idolatry when that's not what you're talking about.
Yeah, to me, it just sounds like you're saying their subjective interpretation is wrong, but there is a right subjective interpretation, so theirs is idolatry. But
Yeah,
I can read it correctly, because and the only differentiating factor is that you won't say it's inerrant, whereas they would say that it's inerrant, and thus theirs is incorrect and idolatrous, and yours is not. See what I mean?
I mean, as an exercise.
That is not what I'm saying, though.
Okay,
Okay,
I'm just going to pause there for a second and just give the definition of idolatry. Idolatry is the extreme admiration, love, or reverence of something or someone. That's it. That's all it is.
How I interpret it.
Which is basically what Matt said.
Okay, I'm confused because
I'm not claiming.
I'm confused because Shannon asked you if that means there's a right interpretation, and I thought you said yes.
Well, whether or not there's a right interpretation isn't what that's. I'm not claiming that I have the correct interpretation and that someone else's interpretation is wrong. I'm saying that to even say that a human being can read a written thing, there's a problem with all scripture, not just the Bible. Anytime you say, here is the authority of God in written form, someone's going to read that.
Wait,
Did you ever see the book of Eli?
One sec. So I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I need to stick on this point for a second. Okay, so 1 second.
Sure.
So you're saying that the issue here, so let me put it this way: the book itself could be inerrant. The issue is that people will never know or don't have the cognitive faculties required to know that it's inerrant. And so anybody who says that it's inerrant and that their interpretation of it is accurate is just definitionally wrong. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
How do you prove
Yeah.
that?
Right.
Because let's say, for example, I read in Genesis 1:1, and it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And how do you show that my interpretation of that passage is wrong?
Yeah.
Well, I think the Bible is basically a Rorschach test. And so it's so full of contradictions.
Arnie, I really need you to answer my question. If you're going to assert that human beings cannot read, and by the way, you already screwed your argument up by saying books that are making appeals to divine authority, because the real problem here is language and intent, whether it's divine authority or not. But if you're going to say that human beings can't understand it, how can you show that my understanding of Genesis 1:1 is wrong?
Yeah.
I can't show that it's wrong.
Okay, so then could it be right?
I suppose so, yes.
So doesn't that invalidate everything you were saying a minute ago?
I think it does,
In what way?
You said human beings cannot have a correct understanding of Scripture, all Scripture.
Someone could quite literally accidentally understand everything perfectly.
They could be Yeah, they could accidentally think.
No. Why is it an accident? If it's written in a language with words that have usages,
well, you were
and Genesis 1:1. No, stop. And Genesis 1:1 has been translated translated into English as, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. What is confusing about that? I understand all of those words in some context. So if you're going to say that I can't know whether or not it's correct, which is a different thing than you claimed before, I mean, you keep bouncing around. We got you away from the claim of idolatry, but first you say we can't be right, and now you just say we can't know we're right. Well, that's trivial. Of course, we can't know what the original intent is. We're always going to come up with our best guess, but that's true for Harry Potter too.
Yeah. It also begs the question to me, like, why believe any of it at all? Like, based on the grounding that even you seem to have, it's just a book. We're fallible. We're doing some sort of interpretive model that's subjective based on this text and our understanding of the text. But you have one that you believe. You have what you would suggest that other people have wrong ones. And it's difficult for me to discern how you can have any sort of certainty over what the wrong version of interpretation is if you don't somehow seem to buy into the fact that you must have a right one. You need to have that perspective to shift from, right?
I think there might be a misunderstanding as to where I'm coming from.
Maybe. It's difficult to follow the trails.
I do not hold the position that I have the correct interpretation.
So you hold a wrong interpretation of the Bible?
No, I didn't say that either.
I don't believe that the Bible is necessarily divinely inspired at all. I don't believe essentially in Scripture, period, because of the fallibility of human beings to interpret. I don't think if God was going to reveal his will to man, it would be through the written word, which he knows is...
So you're not a Christian then?
Problematic. I don't think God would do it that way, and so I basically
but my question was, are you a Christian? So are you a Christian?
No, I am not a Christian. I'm not a
Okay.
Christian.
So but you are a theist of some flavor or another, right?
Yeah, I'm basically an ex-Mormon that has not released all. I feel like you guys are sucking me in.
I have that effect. I just want to explore this because it's interesting to me that I understand that it can get contentious when you're talking about things. I get that. Like, it's a contentious topic. So it sounds to me like you're an ex-Mormon. You came to this sort of realization that you're rolling around in your head that all of these interpretations are subjective. And anybody who says that the Bible is like an infallible word of God couldn't say that. That includes you, and thus you no longer hold to that scripture. So you're in this sort of ether purgatory state, possibly, where you're trying to make sense of maybe the vestiges of a previous belief, and you're working through it. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's purgatory because that's kind of endless. I feel like in fact, I'll just put a call out there right now.
Okay.
Any theologians out there that because you guys get a bad rap from people accuse you of like only taking dumb callers, and that drives me crazy. I know that you're not.
We're talking to you. You're not dumb, are you?
I know. Yeah, exactly. So basically, I feel like I'm in this vortex. I've jumped out of the ship of Mormonism. I'm in the water, and there's this vortex that is atheism, and I'm calling around to anybody out there. If anybody has any good evidence, please call into the show, because the more I listen to the show, the less and less hope I have that someone out there has the answers.
Hey, instead of looking at it as not having hope that someone has the answers, look at it as this positive opportunity that you don't need to get answers from there, and you've come to that realization. And coming to that realization that maybe isn't the place to get the answers means that you can start looking in the right places.
Yeah, one of the things is people have asked before, you know, like I remember somebody asked Dennis Loubet, when you get rid of a religion, what do you replace it with? And Dennis Loubet's answer was, when you cure cancer, what do you replace it with? Now, I get it. For most people coming out of religion, they're not going to look at that, even the language you used. So this was the contentious part here. You started off with this thing about idolatry because your brain is still working in terms of there must be a right answer, even if we don't have access to it. And that may not be true, because that presumes that there's some, you even went to this notion of divine. And so you're talking about how you're losing hope that somebody's going to come up with an answer. What you should have hope for is that we are going to discover what the truth is. And if the truth is that there isn't a God, then that's still hopeful, because what you have when you rid yourself of false beliefs is the truth. And if the truth is ugly, and the truth is that this is the one and only life we're going to get, and we need to do things right the first time, and we need to make sure that we're not wasting this life away trying to work towards our own planet, you know, in Mormonism, or a heaven in some other notion. Which heaven do you go for? Which hell do you avoid?
Galaxy.
Yeah, your own galaxy, your own planet.
Well, that changes things.
But it's
I'll reconsider.
that might as well be, it might as well be somebody told you, hey, when you get to be 40, you're going to inherit $1 billion. And if you spent your first 39 years behaving as if you were going to be a billionaire at 40, and it turns out you don't inherit $1 billion, you might be completely financially devastated. Your life could be completely ruined because you've been living as if something were true, and it turns out it's not. And that's why we do what we do. Because if in fact there is a God, I'd like to know, Shannon would like to know, but if there's not, it's really disappointing to keep meeting people who are living their life, voting based on these beliefs, determining how they're going to treat others based on these beliefs, determining how to spend their money, their lives, and how they interact with other people based on these beliefs.
Which is
if in fact they're not true, what could be more tragic than an entire civilization, or the majority of a civilization, sacrificing the one and only life they're going to get in the hopes of something better afterlife?
Yeah. And it's a mourning process too. So when I hear you say, I'm losing hope, I want to make sure that I interject, because I heard some of the reason that I asked those exploratory questions is because I heard some of the vestiges of when I was attempting to rationalize on my way out too. And I've heard it in other people, where you get to the point that you're like, oh, okay, like this doesn't make sense. And you start to go through this almost like grieving and self-assessment process. Like, how did I believe that? Is there a way I could continue to believe that? What would that look like? And once you come out the other side of that, you do have a degree of grief. So I just want you to know that, like with most grief, there's another side of it. You come out the other side, and there's still beauty, there's still life, there's still you. There's just a better, newer version of you that possibly understands themselves and the world a little bit better and gets to move forward with that knowledge, feeling more whole and not less, and not needing something from the outside to justify themselves. So I'm glad that we got to this portion of the call. So I appreciate you calling in.
And the last clarification on the idolatry thing, now that I know more about where you're coming from, there's certain language that only makes sense in the context of religion. I know what idolatry means, but I don't have a problem with idolatry. It's not like there's anything out in the secular world that says it is wrong to worship false idols, or it is wrong to revere these false things. And so when you say something like that, like, people need to understand that when they're claiming the Bible's infallible, that's idolatry. You might as well have said, if they claim the Bible isn't infallible, it's a sin. Because the concept of sin means nothing to me, because it doesn't exist in reality. Yeah.
Nor does it to me now. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Well, I feel like this was productive. I think we ended well, Ernie. I hope you felt that we understand you a little bit better. Work through the clarification process together. And I wish you luck in the rest of your journey. Call back again sometime. Back again sometime, and let us know how it's going.
I'm going to pause that for a second. Is it Cafe, which is a fantastic name? Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it. They do get a lot of lame corners. You're absolutely right. it's worth asking the question, why do they get such lame corners? I have often thought that an awful lot of the theists that call in, they give their argument, and it's an argument that's been given lots and lots and lots of times. It's an argument that's been discussed lots and lots and lots of times, and the argument just doesn't hold water, but people still call in. And I just think that if I was going to call in here and try and challenge them on an issue, I would at least look on the web first to see what the arguments are against me. If that would be almost like the concept of due diligence. You just make sure that your argument is sound, that holds water, and a lot of people don't do that. And I agree. And the other problem that I have with this, and I may be speaking out of turn here because I'm not quite sure whether exactly what you mean by this, but for me, I'm a physicist. So when I look at issues that come up with science, what I tend to find is an awful lot of the people that call in, and it is a lame call. What they're doing is they're calling in and they've got some idea about science, and it's because they've read a book, a popular book, a book written by, you know, a popular author like Sean Carroll, Lawrence Krauss, Christopher Hitchens. He wasn't a scientist, he was a journalist, but he referenced scientific arguments, you know, those kind of people. And or maybe even things like Stephen Hawking's Brief History of Time, those kind of things. And because those books are written for the public in order to try and pass over a piece of information to the public, they tend to be written at a fairly low level. And sometimes when you do that, just like the educational process, which is the kind of world that I live in, sometimes you have to kind of bend the truth a little bit just to get the ideas over. And but people take that then as feeling, okay, I kind of understand that. I understand this fairly low level argument, and I am now empowered to take on the world and, you know, and express my views as a scientist or a scientific argument, and it just doesn't work. So if I can just read that, my assumption is that Matt's hyper-skeptical to the point where people otherwise would call, eventually realize it's not worth it. Yeah, okay, fair enough. I think that's probably true too. I think that Matt, my personal opinion of Matt, I've kind of met him, and when he's visited the UK, I met him in Cambridge, and I think that wow, okay. And I think that sometimes he gets too frustrated too quickly, but the problem is that people call in, and when they start talking to him about their position, he needs to clarify. One of the first things very often when scientists start talking about, and they're not quite sure what they're going to talk about, the first thing they have to do is set out the definitions. Let's set out the groundwork of what we're talking about so that we both agree, so we can move forward. And I think Matt takes that view, which is a really useful view, but it does irritate the hell out of people. And I'm not suggesting this is you, but very often people, I think, and I would do this, they have their argument written down, and they dare not deviate. So all they want to do is kind of read the argument that they've literally got written down, and that's absolutely fine. But the problem is that if they get diverted then because Matt says, well, hang on a minute, what is your definition of a God? That just kind of throws the argument. It takes them down a branch they don't want to go down, and that can be really tricky then for them, because they get fed up and they feel that they're on the back foot. And then when they try to kind of get back on track, you know, Matt will often like pull them back and say, hang on, you haven't answered my question yet. And it's not that he's trying to be a dick about it. He's just trying to make sure that the groundwork is clear so that they can then move forward in a sensible way. But it doesn't always come over that way. But in fairness to Matt, if anybody does that, I have the same issue when I talk to students about aspects of physics. And I think they do get irritated with me because I insist on understanding the words they're using, their definitions. And yeah, it doesn't always work. Sometimes you irritate people without meaning to. Not that I want to put words into Matt's mouth. But thank you for the comments.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Not a problem, Arnie. See you later.
I can
I
check
like
you
that
out
call.
now since I know a
I
reference
like it
to
when they go away. You
when
didn't
you're on.
anticipate them going. I love that.
Well, we all learn stuff. I learn stuff on this show every week. I learn from you. I learn from callers. Despite what some people think, I am not just sitting here trying to shut everything down and saying no. That's cynicism, not skepticism. But I have done this for a while, so I have specific questions. And so when somebody calls in and says, "Oh, don't you think that claiming the Bible is infallible is equal to idolatry?" My answer is, I don't care. I just don't. What I care about is whether or not it's rational, whether or not it's true, whether or not there's a good reason to believe it. And so that's the direction I was trying to go, to getting to move away from the religious language. And when he wouldn't go there, it's like, okay, how do we move forward? And so
you asking him those questions actually helped me hear some things in him that made me realize that he must be questioning.
Yeah, and then you asked the questions based on what you heard. That's how we all get better at this. This is not the thing I love about doing this show. Isn't it's Sunday, I get to go in and hang up on people and claim they're stupid or whatever else. That's genuinely not what this is about, even if it feels that way sometimes to some people.
Yeah, that was good. I like that. Okay, so we're gonna talk to Jade. We'll talk to Jade next. Hi, Jade.
Hi.
Hi, Jade.
Hi, I hope you guys are doing well. I hope everything goes well with you, Matt, and all your meds and stuff. You guys have been super helpful with my whole process. I guess to catch you guys up real quick,
Yes.
I recently got diagnosed with cancer up in near the end of last year, as well as going through with COVID and just other personal things in my life.
Wow.
So it's been a lot.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and I'm so glad that despite the diagnosis, that you're able to call in and talk to us, because that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's been a whole adventure to be able to try to be a more open person. With this being a thing, I consider myself a spiritualist, and so I grounded up eggshells and had ash from whatever I could find, whatever I burned, and in my little ceremonies I did little moon things, and that was and I had originally been grown up as a theist, and so I've gone through all these periods of trying to figure out what is life, and I'm getting people being I'll pray for you, just pray, you should probably look into the Bible, look for God, ask him for help. And it's just when I was younger and I was trying to figure out my sexuality and my gender identity, and this was all stuff that I was questioning when I was 5, when I was really young, and as well as seeing how hypocritical and how toxic it was, and then trying to figure out God doesn't like the way that I am, but it feels so natural. And so I remember praying so much and being God, help me out, tell me I'm not, show me a sign. And so it was I would get these thoughts of well, you're not okay. And then there was a moment after I walked down the aisle and I considered myself saved, I was still feeling as if I was rejecting this part of myself. And so I would still pray, and then that thought of you're not okay just turned into it almost felt as if my thoughts had evolved, and I was these are your thoughts, these aren't this isn't God telling you anything, this is you just trying to find comfort in what it is. And so then that year, it was 2014, and the whole we're allowed to get married, gay marriage was allowed, and so that sparked up a whole bunch of conversations in our church, people saying derogatory things and gay, they're building our bridge to hell, with gay land, and I'm what the hell are you guys even talking about? This is hurting me on the inside. And so I broke away from being a theist, and then I found spiritualism, and it's helped me in the way of crystals as a placebo is what I'm finding out now. Mm-hmm. And so now that I have, I'm dealing with chemotherapy currently. I'm about to go through my last week right now, and it's been going really well.
Oh, good.
I haven't prayed. I haven't turned my crystals. I haven't turned to my eggshells. And I feel as if though
Turn
my
to the
whole
doctors.
life, I keep giving credit to first it was God who got me through the rough young years, and then when God was rejecting me for being just being who I was, I turned to crystals, and that I have cancer now, so it's it obviously wasn't the crystals, it wasn't me not worshiping the moon or whatever enough, Like it's really just life. Like it's me just constantly I have to give myself more credit in being strong. But the thing that I struggle with is like knowing that there's nothing, and that I feel like I've almost, like, all that time that I've wasted, like, you know, grinding eggshells or doing whatever the hell kind of spiritual practices I was doing. I could have been out volunteering way more. I could have been out doing so much more things with my life than feeling as if so. And this is why it also this was triggered in my whole chemotherapy, was like, oh, well, you know what, like, life has been so hard, and I'm constantly just trying to love everybody, and, like, it just constantly feel like this world is filled with so much hate, and, like, maybe this was, like, I'm supposed to reject the chemotherapy, and, like, I just die, and, like, you know, and then I move on to the next life, or I move on to, like, whatever the hell there is, because I still felt like there was, and I have to realize, like, there's nothing, and I almost felt like I almost, like, killed myself in, like, a weird, like, spiritual way, like, I'm done with this. And so, like, I'm trying to figure out, like, how to be okay with, like, you know, that there's nothing, and, like, I have to really, like, especially when I'm done with this whole chemotherapy, like, I have to view every day as if it's, like, it could be my last, because I don't know, like, nobody knows, and I want to at least die knowing that I tried helping in any way that I could to humanity. So I'm just trying to figure out how to be okay with the nothingness, and, like, my whole idea of, like, reincarnation and, like, an astral plane was like, oh, well, we have electrons and we have electricity in our brains, and that, like, that can't be destroyed. I mean, so,
You said brain. I went,
You have pushed the magic button that turns Shannon on. Welcome to the show.
Somebody said brain. Sorry to interrupt you, Jade. Like, your story is amazing. Like, I want to congratulate you, because it sounds like, I feel like there's nothing really I can contribute aside from maybe having the conversation about mortality and grappling with mortality. But you came to all of this yourself through tremendous adversity, and I'm proud of you. And I know that other people that have heard your story right now probably recognize a portion of themselves in at least some of it, and hearing your strength going through it would probably help a lot of other people. So thank you for sharing it. But if grappling with mortality is something that you would like to have to hear our opinions about, I can definitely speak towards that.
Another thing I would want to hear. Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, because it sounds like at the end of it, that's the one thing that's left that you're struggling with, and you were able to come to terms with most of the rest of it as you were going through your journey despite the adversity. So the thing that I think about regarding morality is that, or mortality, is that me knowing that my life is finite is actually one of the best gifts I was ever given, because as a Christian, I thought that I was always going to have an after, right? So I didn't ground as much now as I needed to, but I also always thought that I was going to be forgiven, basically regardless of what I did. All I needed to do was ask to be forgiven, and I could absolve myself. Losing that grounded me in the fact that I need to be responsible for my own actions, and that was something that happened here and now, and also pointed me towards understanding that what I do now and the relationships that I have now are essentially all I have. But when it comes to the end is the end, I can't remember who said it, but maybe it was even Matt that said that.
Probably not.
But it was, what's it going to be like after I die? Basically the same as it was before I was born.
That is
Right.
attributed to Mark Twain. I was dead a billion years before I was born and was never bothered by it one bit.
Yes, exactly.
And I get that's not always. Like, I love that.
Ricky Gervais made that comment recently.
It opens some people's eyes, and other people, it doesn't make any difference, because the indoctrination into there's an afterlife. It's the most important thing that matters. Everything you do in this life is about what kind of afterlife you're going to get.
Right.
That is so deeply ingrained in some people that just saying, well, you know, hey, you weren't bothered before you were born, doesn't help everybody. And it's not about getting used to this idea of nothingness. That's the scary thing, is because people get it in their head that if there is no afterlife, then when they die, they will experience nothingness forever. and they don't know what that means.
Right,
And it's because it's nonsense.
Exactly.
You won't be experiencing anything. There will be no you to experience. So this fear of not existing is perhaps better a fear of missing out. And when Christopher Hitchens was near death, and we were at the Texas Free Thought Convention, he pointed out that it's not like somebody's tapping on you on the shoulder and saying, hey, the party's over, go home. What they're doing is they're tapping you on the shoulder and saying, the party's going to keep going, but you have to leave. And that's the part that is really hard.
Yeah, that actually explains the pain very well. And I also want to throw in, I guess I also just worry about like the way that the world goes and people thinking about like how, like, I don't think people think enough about how fragile life is. Like, I live in Colorado, and so like we just had a really bad shooting on Mother's Day, and it's like, dang, like, guys, like, can we stop? And then not only that, but like I come out as having pronouns as like non-binary and having pronouns of they them, still trying to like figure all that stuff out. But then to know that there was like a huge increase in killing and murders with transgender people, like I think it was like 40 something in the last year, and just to know like, oh great, well we have like a whole year left. It's just scary to also feel as if though like you're at the mercy of other people, when all I really want to do is just try to give back as much as I can. I feel as if though like my life, I gave more to humanity than like what my life, you know what I mean, than just dying off and just living for myself.
Can I tell you something, Jade, that I think to myself quite frequently that I think is relevant here? You're calling into this show right now, and a lot of people are watching this show. And I do a show myself on YouTube, and I do this show and other shows. And you get a lot of criticism, you get a lot of attack, like life is hard sometimes, and sometimes it's difficult to discern through the noise. But what I tell myself frequently, and what I tell other people, is you may have just saved the life of a person who you will never hear from. You will never know who they are. You will never know that they heard your words and it made a change. But you speaking them could potentially, and very likely might, have that impact. So just because there is no discernible metric that you can point to that says Jade contributed this much good shit to the world in their life, doesn't mean that that's not the case. Most of the most profound and important things that you will ever do to impact another person, you may never be told about. So you should always just try to be the best version of yourself, knowing that that might be the outcome, even though you may never know.
Right. Yeah. And with this, it definitely like how you said, how it gives you like so much more, like how you love life so much more every day, just knowing that it's the only one life that you have, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Like now, it's like, all right, when I survive, when I'm told that I'm cancer free, I originally wanted to go to school. I wanted to do so much in the past 2 years, and I've been waiting, and I've been super safe, and I've been just trying to think about others. And now that it's like, all right, I can start moving again, then to be hit with this, it's just like, all right, well, when I can finally like go out into the real world, get vaccinated, and like go to school, try to foster a kid way later in life, give them a better life than what I have and what other kids are able to do or are able to go through, or what they would have been put through, like it gives me a lot of like fire on my ass, I guess.
Good.
And that's what I'm really happy about. I just get scared about being at the mercy of others and then just knowing that there's nothing. I guess so. I think it's just in a way.
Good.
Okay, I'm going to pause it there for a moment so I can just have a brief conversation with the comment put up there by Cafe. Again, please forgive me if I'm pronouncing it wrong. But I kind of like it. Atheists often say that nothing happens after we die. I'd like to ask the question to ask the atheist: how do we know that? Has the atheist died, explored the nothingness of the afterlife, and has returned to let us know that there's nothing after we die? Forgive me, I kind of looking to the side here, but I have 3 screens, and it's on my right hand screen. I don't think that's what atheists say. It's certainly not what atheists that I'm aware of say. Nobody says, clearly you are correct. No atheist has died, experienced whatever's going on, and then come back and told us. No atheist should be saying that they know what will happen when we die, because clearly we don't. So I think really that comment is normally a comment that's made when someone asks, what do we think is going to happen when we die? And when you ask what someone thinks rather than what they know, you end up with a different response, or the same response but for a different reason. The argument then is, well, rationally, what can I use to form a judgment of what will happen when we die? And the answer to that surely is, well, one, we don't know. But two, you try to fit it into your worldview based on rationality, not based on faith, not based on an idea of something that has no evidence for it. Most of us try to base that on evidence of the way that the world works, of what goes on. And basically, we have no evidence that anything happens. Now, you could say, well, okay, I don't believe that. What I think happens when we die is that we go to a different place. And we have a kind of a second life, a second experience in a different place. The problem then is, how do we justify that? Now, one argument is, well, we can't justify it. It's based on faith. Somebody has told me, a pastor, an imam, somebody has said to me that's what happens. But that's always a dodgy argument, because lots of people tell us lots of things. And most of the time, if it's contentious, we tend to not believe it. And I don't just mean religion, I mean lots of things. So what we do is we look around us and we experience the fact that there is only this world. There isn't another world that we're aware of. And that doesn't mean there isn't another world, but we don't know of any other. And in this world, we have a collection of laws, scientific laws, if you like, that govern the way that it works, and it kind of works consistently that way. And as we go forward, and there are various things that we don't know, the scientific method slowly, I admit it's not as fast as we'd like it to be, slowly starts to reveal parts of the curtain so that we learn more and more about the way the universe works, and everything then fits into that structure, that picture of the world. And that picture does not involve having a different world that is somewhere else that we cannot define, because it's certainly not in this world, because there's no evidence for it. And you could argue, well, there is evidence for it, because we have mediums who can talk to, or say that they talk to the dead, and they're coming from somewhere else, and it's like some other reality that we can't perceive. But those people, when we look into those people, we have two big problems. And it's the same problem that we have when scientifically we try to investigate things like ESP. The problem is that money's involved. Unlike most areas of research where the scientist is doing the work purely it could be because a company wants them to do the research, which was my life, but very often it's because of the love of the exploration. Then you're doing it on the basis that you're going to report honestly. Well, when it comes to things like, talking to the dead, etc., people that are in another place, there are financial benefits, extreme financial benefits, to actually saying that you can do that. So money gets involved, and we know full well from the way that people respond to the concept of money that people basically lie and scam you in order to make money from you. So that's the first thing. And the second problem that we have is that we do not have a mechanism by which we can test these weird claims. there just isn't a mechanism to do it. But we know that, you know, people can lie. People can I don't know whether saying lying is too strong, but people can lie or misdirect in order to try and make money out of people. And it's generally not reproducible. It doesn't stand up to scientific scrutiny. So we don't have a mechanism by which we can test these things. We have no evidence that a kind of an alternative world exists. So I would argue, with respect to the point that you raised, Cafe, that atheists don't say that nothing occurs when we die. Because we don't know that. It is what we believe is going to happen, i.e. nothing. And that is based on the argument that there is no evidence for anything happening, but there is plenty of evidence that this world, this experience, this reality is the only reality that exists. So I know that some people will probably get quite rigid about the fact that yes, there is nothing, or yes, there is no God. But an atheist should not be saying that there is no God. An atheist should be saying that they do not believe that there is a God because they are not convinced by the evidence or lack of that there is a God. But I don't believe that there's a God. But that doesn't mean there isn't a God. And it doesn't mean that whatever the concept of a God is, does not believe that I would not necessarily believe that given the right evidence. And that's the position of an atheist. And I think that not all atheists say it in the right way, so we get ourselves in trouble a little bit there. But it's all, I think it's all about rationality as opposed to faith.
Jade, we are going to leave you on that note because I think that's a positive note to leave on.
Well, can I just say, if anybody wants to jump in on these issues, or Cafe, if you want to discuss this in more detail, after the show, outside the show, then please contact me, and I'm really happy to discuss all these things. Not that I am in any way, a guru on this. I'm just a physicist. And I will happily chat to you about any of this.
Despite your current fears, that's a natural thing to have. We all have them. And I wish you luck on your journey to work through them. You're awesome. Okay?
I'm going to shoot for just a little bit. Try and get
We're due.
It's fucking awesome.
Great,
there we go.
Zeno.
Oh,
Hi,
Zeno.
Zeno. What would you like to talk about?
Okay, I'm going to predict this is going to be a disaster, since it was last time, and it may probably be this time, and it was awful last time, and I just have this belief that generally people find it very hard to change. So let's see whether this is useful or not.
Is it going to be great? Are we all going to be uplifted at the end of this call?
Yeah, it's going to be really fucking awesome.
No, I'm psyched now. Let's go.
All right, I need to ask a couple questions to get you to understand this a bit.
Oh, good. I always love it when somebody needs to start with getting me to understand shit. That's always good. Go ahead.
I want to type what you're asking, so go ahead.
Yeah, type it out, Matt. I'm not. Go ahead.
All right. Sure. All right, imagine defining God and what you are defining God as. You can basically define God as a giant alien that creates space, time, and matter. Or you could call that alien a god. So inversely,
I'm lost already. That's not quite make sense.
So basically, what if I decide to define a giant alien that creates space, time, and matter, and the first particle that started the trail of evolution in the universe that we know today as a god, versus defining this exact alien as a higher power or just simply an alien? Then we have a problem with labels and definitions.
Which one of those was a question that you were going to ask?
It's the question.
Okay.
The question is coming up with that reasoning first.
Got ya.
And perhaps what even qualifies as a god. So what a god to some may be a giant alien by their definition. And an alien that creates space, time, and matter may not be an alien.
Not that we know how to do that.
By someone else's definition. So the question is, if you understood that, when we're asked to prove a god, what God are you even trying to prove?
Oh, I know.
I know too. I know. You go. Okay, you go. I don't want to fight.
Whatever fucking God the person talking to me believes in. When somebody says they believe in a God, my question is, what God? Define your God. If you want to say, oh, the God I believe in is an alien that created everything, once we get the characteristics of that God down, that's what we address. We do not begin with a definition of God in our head and expect God believers to prove the God in our head. That's asinine. So you're calling in to ask us essentially what God is in our head, and my answer is, I'm going to address whatever God claim the caller makes.
So, for example, with technological advancements, we would not know of the existence of atoms and radio waves simply because it may appear to be invisible to the naked eye.
Zeno,
This is pointless.
why is it that you asked me a question and I answered it, and then you go off on something about technological stuff? Would you acknowledge the point? Okay, then you could acknowledge the point, because this is not just for you to call in and say stuff that you found interesting. Are you calling in to defend a particular God notion?
Yes, I thought the screener would tell you that I'm a deist.
Okay.
So far you haven't. No.
Already know.
Stop. I'm asking questions. Okay. No. See. What the screener has here is evidence for God, and then sense perception, empiricism, reduction ad absurdum, etc. That's what's on there, and that you are a deist. Okay, but what I asked, you called in to say essentially what God, people could define God in different ways. What God are you guys, rejecting? And so then I asked, are you here to defend a God? And your answer was, I'm a deist. I thought the call screener would have told you that. Either defend the God or don't. But don't, what we're trying to do here is if you, oh my God, all we're trying to do is to get you to define what you believe. Tell us what you believe and why. 16 years, what you believe and why. What you believe and why. So Zeno, what do you believe and why?
I believe in a deistic God, and I cannot tell you the exact properties, and I know that's a problem for you.
No, it's a problem for you because you're claiming to believe in something without being able to define it or tell you what the properties are. So that's like me saying, I believe in Blazabadoo, and I don't know what Blazabadoo is, and I can't explain it to you. That means that I am irrational. That's what you're doing, Zeno, is that you are being irrational by claiming to believe in something that you simultaneously acknowledge you cannot define.
No, that's not what's happening, actually.
It absolutely is. It's undeniable. It's undeniable, and here's the way I can prove it. You started off this thing talking about all the different ways that people could define a God. That was a setup to avoid having to define your God. If you're not going to define your God to tell us what it is you believe, I'm no longer interested in speaking to you about it, because it is a waste of time for you to tell us why you believe something when you can't tell us what it is.
Well, I wanted to talk to Shannon about it because I didn't think I'd make progress with you, Matt. So
yes, isn't that because I'm too narcissistic? Aren't you the jackhole that called me too narcissistic and said I wouldn't understand?
You are narcissist. I mean, Joe even fucking called and knows. So the first call was trying to sit in your place to let you know that it's very hard.
Unfortunately, he failed and you failed, and I'm going to keep putting you in your place because it is absolutely ridiculous to tell me that you can tell me why you believe in something when you can't tell me what you believe. And you can call me a narcissist or whatever name you want, whenever you want, but I'm not the guy calling into shows claiming to have detected the undetectable, claiming to be rationally justified in believing the unbelievable, claiming to have defined the undefinable.
So is it
next you're going to F the unineffable?
When your field of view, wait, I can't even speak. I'm trying.
Okay, go.
You might be done speaking quicker than you think. Are you going to address the point? Or are you just going to sit here and tell me how you wanted to talk to Shannon because you're afraid of me?
No, I'm not afraid of you. I'm trying to.
You absolutely are.
That you're asking for.
Can you tell us what you believe? That's the first half of the question. What do you believe?
Yeah, if I can get a word, if I can talk, I can.
I've asked you several times,
and I keep getting talked over.
No. You said you couldn't give us a definition. You couldn't tell us about the properties of it.
Nah, you're a fucking idiot. Goodbye.
Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Are you going to defend your God, or are you just going to look like a wimp and run away? Do you want me to only let you talk to Shannon? Is that what it is? Okay, you win. I'll shut up. I'll let Shannon own you.
Hi.
Oh, he hung up. He hung up.
Zeno was stunningly
Okay, all right,
unimpressive
well,
there.
Good
Sorry,
talk.
Shannon. I imagine you could have.
I wanted to hear what his definition of a deist God is.
He
believes
didn't
in
have one.
something. So if you can't,
I'm happy that you're on, Shannon, and because I think you have some input on this.
okay.
I'd like to share with you another notion of God or the soul or consciousness. They're all the same thing to me. I want to ask you, is it a fact that the brain sees and hears?
No, is it a fact that the brain sees and hears? Depends on what you mean by that. I'm assuming that you're. Are you going to let me answer the question?
No, it is not a fact that the brain sees and hears. Information comes from the outside world to receptors, and that information is passed to the brain. The eyes are more of an extension of the brain than the ears are, but it's the same basic principle. All of our senses interact with the external world as far as we are aware, and signals then get passed to the brain.
Mind body problem, and so it's like if there's something that it is like to be matter with regards to a brain, and therefore when you say the brain sees and hears, are you talking about the brain physically, or are you talking about the self? And I would have what I think is, I'm exploring the philosophy of it a little bit more, but probably like a monist position with regards to that. So I would say that yes, it would be a fact that the brain sees and hears, because I see our conscious experience of ourselves as being synonymous with brain states.
Okay, how does a brain, if you imagine what a brain is, it's a lump of matter.
I can imagine quite well what a brain is.
Great. How does it see, hear, taste, and smell?
Which one do you want to start with? Do you want to start with olfactory, visual? Like which perceptual cognition system do you want to start with?
The brain itself. Because the brain, would you agree the brain is made out of brain cells?
Oh God! Okay, this is going to get stunningly boring.
No, well, I mean, if you're talking about cells that construct a brain, then yeah, I guess they're each individual cells of the
I need
brain.
to interrupt for 1 second.
Okay.
The crew should probably go ahead and put Shannon up in a one shot.
You good, Matt? Okay.
I'm good, actually. This is going to be fun.
Good. Okay, so I want to get back to your other question, though, John. You said, like, how does the brain process either vision or olfactory senses or taste? So do you want the answers to those questions? Because I could start with the visual system. It's actually really interesting. We could talk about that if you'd like. Did you want to start with vision?
I don't think John knows, and he's not
Let's
interested.
skip the eyes and the ears and just go straight to the brain. What
Yeah.
there's an image in my brain. I'm looking at an apple. What in my brain is seeing that apple? The brain cells?
Okay, so
This is a fantastic example of a little bit of knowledge does not go a long way. John does not know what he's talking about, and unfortunately, I suspect he's about to get owned by Shannon.
when you're looking at an apple, the light that bounces off the apple hits the back of your eye, and there's rods and cones on the back of your eye on your retina, and they have a photosensitive protein. That photosensitive protein changes its shape and constitution slightly based on the wavelength that hits it. It travels through your optic nerve, across the optic chiasm, goes through the midbrain structures, and into the occipital lobe, which is at the back of your brain. Once it hits the occipital lobe receives that change in constitution of the proteins that are on your cones and rods that are in your brain, and it recognizes them by comparing them against what it's by some midbrain structures like the hypothalamus. It'll look at your memory. It'll go through some reticular formations that are in your brainstem, and then ultimately the thalamus, and then up to the prefrontal cortex, so that it can compare things that have previously been perceived with a contextual realization of that mental state, so that you will have a visual experience. Now, if when you're saying image appears in my brain, there's not like an apple, there's not like a picture of an apple on the back of your brain. But what we can do if you're looking at an apple is we can measure the effect on your retina against the activity in your brain. And without knowing, for example, that you're looking at an apple, we can tell you that we know that you're looking at an apple by looking at the activation network. So it seems to me that, like, I get that that's not necessarily what you're asking, but that's how that visual system, like on a super high level, works. What this all seems to kind of boil down to for you probably is that there is a mind-body problem. So why is it that there is something that it is like to be matter, and inarguably for us, that matter that we would be referencing would have to be the brain. There's demonstrable evidence that anything that's resembling an experience has to take place there, which is why we're talking about brains. Otherwise, we'd be talking about our fingertips, right? Like, I can remove my fingertips and still have experiences, but if I can't remove if I did even a minor injection to the reticular formation that sits in the brainstem underneath my thalamus, I would no longer have conscious experiences. That's just a fact. So that's why we're discussing the brain. Now, if you want to talk about why there is a mind-body problem, that's an interesting philosophical conversation that God doesn't answer any better than science answers right now. It's just a problem that everybody has. So is that what you're attempting to do by demonstrating that mental states aren't the same as brain matter, or are we both kind of wasting your time right now?
No, well, two things. No, I don't really want to talk about the mind-body problem like that. I'd rather say, is it consciousness itself doing the perceiving, or is it the brain cells that are doing the perceiving?
Okay.
What do you mean by is it consciousness itself?
It's cells, right?
The brain is made of, it is a brain, it is made of cells. So the cells that it is made of are definitionally brain cells, but there are varying types of cells. So there's soma, which is, so they're all the same?
No, they're so not. John does not know.
They all have cytoplasm, they all have RNA, they all have DNA,
oh, Christ.
Right?
Okay.
Cells,
well, John is just making a fool of himself.
All cells, right? They all have...
Well, I mean,
right?
So do you know what the difference is between like white matter and gray matter in the brain, for example? Like, it would all constitute cells, like everything at a cellular level, especially if you're talking about a living cell, of course, it's going to have cytoplasm and stuff, right? Like, I get that, but I think you may be not understanding the difference between like what a neuron is and what white matter in the brain is, and what other because there's other components of the brain that don't consist of soma, cell body, from neurons, but are in fact like axons and dendrites that are extending from those neurons, constituting the white matter, and they function in incredibly different ways. They do very different things. So I'm unsure what your question is. Like, if you're looking at a I'm not sure what your point is, other than it seems to be that you're getting at the mind-body problem, but not maybe understanding that that's what you're trying to get at.
So doesn't understand.
I'm addressing the consciousness versus. Is consciousness a perceiver, or is it the brain a perceiver? Now,
okay, I need to jump in here just a moment and just make a brief comment. I will try to be brief. I'll change the habits of a lifetime and try to be brief. If you want to argue a scientific point, you have to make sure that you have the knowledge, the depth of knowledge to be able to do that, if you want to be taken seriously. And here's the rub. In order to get that knowledge, you do not get that knowledge by reading a book. You get that knowledge by investing time and energy, which involves speaking to people, going to lectures, reading books, but you do it over decades. It is not something that you pick up from a YouTube clip, from a pastor. And I know I'm being slightly negative here, but that's where a lot of this comes from, or from reading a book written by a scientist for the popular readership. And you're seeing a perfect example here. John has a script here, and it clearly involves him just assuming that, well, brain cells are brain cells. He clearly does not understand the ridiculous nature of that particular statement. And unfortunately, although Shannon is absolutely lovely and trying not to be too aggressive here, he's looking foolish, and he just needs to kind of back off and not follow this line, because it is so not fruitful.
Consciousness. So what kind of... So I'm sorry to keep stopping you, but I feel as though we're going to go down too many rabbit trails if I allow you to keep going much further past your actual question. So when you're saying, is consciousness as a perceiver, are you some sort of substance dualist, like, or do you think that there's something outside of the brain that's perceiving stuff that interacts with the brain somehow? Is that what you think?
I would say that the consciousness is the soul, but we don't have to call it that if it's a trigger word. I could just say is consciousness a being.
It's a trigger word.
I'm not triggered by the word the soul. It's not a trigger word. I'm very, very desperately attempting to kind of discern what your understanding is of the brain at all, so that I can figure out what your argument even is outside of it just being the mind-body problem.
Yeah, because sorry, but since I laughed, I figured I'd go ahead and jump back in here.
Okay.
Basically, John's entire concern is, what is consciousness and where does it come from? What is the observer? And so yes, he's advocating for mind-body dualism, because what he thinks the answer to consciousness is the soul. But the problem is, that's like saying, what is the explanation for electricity? And you say electricity, because all you're doing is using a different word or the same word or whatever word you want to point to this. And so while we haven't solved and don't understand everything about consciousness, what we do know is that everything that's ever been attributed to the soul, like I would be interested in what John's definition of the soul is, because everything that's ever been attributed to the soul that has been identifiable is a function of the brain. Memory, identity, preferences, things like that. There's nothing about a soul that has been proven to exist or be true, which is not a function of the brain. What's left?
Consciousness is the soul.
Well, you can assert that all day long. Congratulations. All you've done is substituted a word. You haven't done anything to edify or explain or expand our understanding of consciousness. You just prefer a different word.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. We don't have to use the word soul at all. But I'm trying to figure out what in a cell organelle. Is it the ribosome that does the perceiving? What in the brain is doing the perceiving? It is an organ made of cells.
In your brain, I'm not sure that it's working.
Okay, John, I really want to get through to you right now that you are just talking about the mind-body problem. You are just talking about why it is that there is anything that it is like to be matter, right? So that is... You keep telling me that's not what you're doing, and I'm certain that's what it is. And you and I would both acknowledge that there is a mind-body problem. Why is there something that it's like to be matter? Now, you maybe approach it differently than I do, and there's approaches to solving that problem that I drastically disagree with. For example, substance dualism. I drastically disagree with substance dualism. And one of the reasons that I do comes back to those cell membranes that we were talking about. When we have neurons in our brain, those neurons fire to release neurotransmitters so that we can have any kind of experience at all, right? So that we can move, so that we can see, so that we can think, so we can do anything. And that cell membrane, in order for it to fire, has to have a specific constitution of sodium and potassium ions on either side of it. And then it has to have the mitochondria inside that cell, inside that neuronal cell, produce a chemical called ATP, and that ATP opens the channel so that those sodium and potassium ions can transfer back and forth across that cell membrane in order for that neuron to fire. Now, if you're going to be somebody who's like a substance dualist, then you would have to explain to me how that substance, that external substance, acts upon the brain in order to get that constitution of sodium and potassium ions to exist as it is, stimulate a mitochondria in order to produce ATP, open that channel to have that action potential, and I don't think that's possible. Now, there are things like panpsychism that's kind of interesting, or pantheism, that are kind of interesting ways that people look at solving this problem from a philosophical standpoint. None of them have answered that problem. So you telling me that the mind-body problem exists doesn't negate my perspective, nor does it even attempt to try to understand my perspective, because I acknowledge that that's a problem. No,
Can I-
so I'm not sure what you're even
I'm just
trying
to
to get at.
I mean, so first, I have a couple quick questions, John. Do you know what an emergent property is?
Yeah, it's a claim that the consciousness is an emergent property of the
No,
brain.
no,
That's not
John.
what I asked.
No, John, I didn't mention consciousness at all. I said, do you know what an emergent property is?
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
Yeah. So, like, there's nothing about a water molecule that is wet. Wetness is a property that emerges from water molecules interacting, right? So,
you're
my
using an analogy. That's an analogy. I don't care about
John, if
No,
you
it's
would
not.
quit trying to rush to the fucking finish line and just answer the question, we could do this so much
I've heard
easier.
it before.
Well, then why did you fucking call? Why are you wasting our time? If you're not willing to do this, because my next question for you was, if
I'm barely
John, I've been silent for ages. Would you let me finish my fucking question?
The answer is yes, John.
Are you going to let me finish my question, John?
I'm barely talking as it is.
John, what's your explanation for how consciousness works?
Good question.
It's its own source, and I think it's an entity, not something we have. It's something we are.
Oh, God.
And I call it consciousness centrism,
John,
where
John,
reality
John.
moves around consciousness. I don't believe a brain can sense or perceive. It's just
Okay, I've now muted you because you don't think a brain can sense or perceive. When I'm asking you how it works, I don't want you to tell me what you think happens. I want you to tell me what justification you have. When I say, how does consciousness work? You think you have a solution to consciousness, something that philosophers and scientists haven't really sorted out, but you think you have one. I don't just want you to tell me what it is. I want you to tell me why. And if your why is just, you don't believe a brain can do this, then we're hanging up, because what you don't believe is not a justification for your position. So how do you think consciousness works, and what is your reason for thinking that?
I believe consciousness is its own source, and I deduce that by comparing the models that science has. So we have different models. We can compare the models and say which one's the better model. I think that consciousness is actually pure fucking magic, but we can deduce what it's sourced from. I don't know what consciousness is, what it is, but I know it could be its own source, or it could be sourced from the brain. And so
Okay,
far,
John,
you haven't proven that it's sourced from the brain.
John, I'm interrupting you again, and I'm sorry, but I have to, because my co-host sat here for ages explaining to you how a brain works. And when I ask you how consciousness works, you tell me it might be this, it might be this. I think it's a source because I don't believe science's model. If you don't believe science, that's your problem. I'm going to stick with the science. And if you can't come up with a way to demonstrate that what you think is true about consciousness is actually true, why should anybody listen to you? We have someone here who's studied the science, who's giving you the answers that are backed up by facts, and you are spouting opinions and how you don't trust the science. Why should anybody care what you think about consciousness?
Is it my turn to speak?
Oh, could
Ask
he,
that
Mark?
again, I dare you.
No, I'm just trying. No, I wasn't being rude. I was actually asking if it's my turn to speak because I'm trying to be polite. But I don't think that you're open-minded enough to be progressive about talking about consciousness and making
I'm not open-minded enough. You're the one sitting here denying science, and you're going to say that I'm not open-minded enough. That's a great defense. I'm glad we backed you into a corner where your only remaining defense is to say that we are too stupid or not open-minded enough. We just can't understand.
I'm trying to make progress.
You're not trying to make progress. You are trying to avoid progress because I've asked you to explain consciousness, and you have nothing.
You can't. It's pure fucking magic, but we can identify.
magic.
No, wait, your explanation is that it's just magic?
Why do we
He
continue
said that
wasting time
twice.
on someone who wants to know what the science is? We tell him the science, and then he says it's pure fucking magic. Well, magic isn't real, John.
Well, the source of consciousness may be a mystery, okay? Maybe mystery is a better term than magic. But
I agree.
Identify the source of consciousness. I'm trying to make progress with you, Matt.
No, you're not.
You and I to come. Yes, I am.
No, you're not.
Please listen to me.
See, I can do this over and over again. No, you're not. Can you give something that is an explanation? Can you give an explanation?
I can try to.
Can you give an explanation for what consciousness is, or are you just pulling shit out of your ass?
I'm saying, what is the source of consciousness? That's
I
what
can try to answer that one. Like, there's an interesting theory that Mark Soms has recently put out, who's a neuroscientist who actually studied psychoanalytics, and it has to do with the setup of the reticular formation in the brainstem. He came to it by studying specifically.
Here we go. And now Shannon is going to give more scientific input, and unfortunately, this is going to go straight over the top of John. And I'm not trying to be horrible to John, but he literally does not know what he's talking about. And this was such a bad call. He should never have made this call because he was simply not prepared for... Why would you call into a show when your argument is actually rubbish? Now, the only argument that I have for that is that you don't know it's rubbish. So everybody that wants to argue for anything that borders on science, if you do not have a scientific argument because you do not understand it, and surely we have to be open-minded enough to realize when we don't understand something, then don't go for it, because you get attacked. You're in such a weak position. It's just not worth it. Okay, Cafe, yeah, fair enough. Okay, but do we expect every person to know everything about every aspect? I'm not trying to suggest that Shannon knows everything about neuroscience, but she knows a hell of a lot about it. And let's be honest, she knows a lot more about it than most people that call in. And most people that call in and start talking about some aspect of neuroscience are not going to be in the same league. And it's not my fault. And I'm not trying to be horrible about it, but that's just the way it is. Nobody knows everything, well, about a particular area of research. We're all trying our best. But some people clearly have put decades of study into it. And this is an issue that a lot of people don't like. When you have put decades and decades of personal research into something, it does tend to mean that your opinion on that particular subject counts for more than someone who's read a popular book, which I know is my kind of go-to at the moment. And I'm not trying to denigrate people who are trying, but that's just the way it is. That's what it kind of means to be an expert in something. Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Experience through facial expressions, and even though they couldn't effectively communicate. And because consciousness, we think of consciousness as a more higher level. We think of it more so as like logic centers.
But surely,
and rationality,
Cafe, you're
and
not supporting John
level.
in this particular
He has
argument.
a theory that's very, very intriguing that that has to do with the reticular formation being this sort of seed of consciousness, where from an emotional perspective, and that our rational processes are built on top of it. And some of the reasons that he has for supporting it are, we have nociceptors like throughout our skin, for example, and those nociceptors are a form of neuron that exists in our body, and they go through the reticular formation before they enter our conscious experience. So it works almost like a gateway. So it can have a gateway to perception entering the conscious experience. And one of the reasons that it kind of shuts down almost 80% of those sensations that our neurons are having before we get any conscious experience of them is because it's deemed unnecessary by the reticular formation to give us that conscious experience. So the reticular formation, and it's one of the only things in the brain that if you damage it to any degree, you will lose the ability to even have conscious experiences. Not just like something about who you are will change. Like if you mess around with your frontal lobe, like you can fundamentally change who you are, but you'll still have conscious experiences. So that can't have anything to do with consciousness. Same with split brain, you'll still have sort of conscious experiences. But this, when you drill down, does make sense from a parsimonious standpoint too, because it would make sense that any sort of vertebrate animals that have this sort of brainstem structure would also have conscious experience, which would have a benefit to survival, because they would be able to not only take in perception and react to it sort of like in a visceral reflexive way, but actually be able to have slightly higher order processings with the reticular formation working as a gateway.
So you've identified the source of consciousness.
It's a posit. It's an interesting posit that's worth exploring. It's a new theory. His book's called The Hidden Spring.
Let me ask a really easy question, John. We don't have an explanation for consciousness, and you don't have an explanation for consciousness. So, what should we
identify the source?
John, do you not know what "so" means? I'm in mid-fucking sentence. So, if neither us nor you have an explanation for consciousness, what's the point of this discussion?
I never claimed to having I said the source of consciousness. What is the source? We can identify the source, not in it.
John,
why couldn't it be the reticular formation that I just mentioned? Why
is the point of your conversation about consciousness? How does this relate to a God?
Well, okay, we could call consciousness God.
Why?
If you want
What end? Like, for what reason, though? It's just semantics. Like, I don't understand how this is progressing. Like, isn't what I just said kind of interesting? Doesn't that make some degree of sense? Like,
he doesn't know what you said. John has no comprehension of anything you said because he doesn't trust the science. He thinks it's all magic, and he wants to recall consciousness God, which doesn't get us
John is going to regret using the word magic.
John is a monumental waste of my time.
You're not progressing.
Oh, John, okay. This is going in
yes,
circles.
John,
I don't
the
understand
anti-science guy gets to tell me I'm not progressing. Go away.
Ad hominem attack. You're nothing.
No. It's not a fallacy, dumbass. It would be, if I said you were wrong because you're stupid, that would be an ad hominem fallacy. But an ad hominem attack isn't a fallacy. If I'm just identifying that you started by saying that I can't progress, and then you're the one who can't actually progress, that's not an ad hominem fallacy. Yes, I will. What do you want me to call you? I will call you anything you want. What would you like me to call you?
No. FaceTime me, you and me, at your house.
Oh,
we can
God almighty.
And not just
John.
put on a show for the audience, because you're putting on a show for the audience. I'm looking for...
Okay, so now you're accusing me of not honestly defending the propositions. You're never getting anywhere near my house. Guaranteed. Okay. And you're not going to have a conversation with me because you don't care about science and you are not willing to talk about the subject. No, you don't. Shannon's been sitting here explaining science to you, and your response is that it's fucking magic.
Consciousness.
I don't know why Shannon hasn't hung up on you yet, so I'm taking
okay,
over.
I'm gonna do.
Goodbye. I already did it.
Okay.
I'm not going to sit here and be told that I'm being dishonest and putting on a show for the audience when the caller is saying it's pure fucking magic. Well, I agree that we don't have a current good explanation for consciousness, but there are a number of different models that have been proposed. And all of the models that have been proposed that are likely to lead us somewhere are the ones that Shannon was trying to tell you about, the ones that are within the bounds of science. Because when the scientists sit around and go, gosh, it's just pure fucking magic, we should just quit. That's how they end up like John.
I've genuinely never heard a scientist, a physicist say that, ever.
It was John's way of saying that we are too closed-minded to see the soul that he sees.
But that doesn't make any sense, though, because he's saying there is a mind-body problem, and I'm like, yeah, no, I totally get it, but there's lots of ways to address it. And then he says,
I'm going to try and move forward to the next call.
On a couple to evidence.
You correct. Why is your
going on in the brain? Does that mean
the soul that was? I would love.
Sorry, I'm trying to catch up.
On. Disappointing.
Samuel.
So before I begin,
who else can we talk to?
Sam.
Let's talk to Samuel.
Let's go for Sam.
Why not? Hi, Samuel. Thank you for your patience.
Hi.
What would you like to talk about today?
So before I begin, I would just like to say the first caller was an absolute jerk to Matt. I would have told him to F off because it's like, okay, first of all, you're just saying all these things about Matt. So first of all, okay.
Samuel,
we get along.
Samuel, stop. Let's not talk about. I don't care about the past callers. I don't need anybody defending me. Sometimes I'm an ass. Sometimes I'm not. Let's just get to what you call.
But that was nice, Sam.
He is an ass sometimes, Samuel. To be fair.
I just said so.
What would you like to talk about, Samuel?
So I'd like to talk about how, for example, when the concept of slavery, for example, comes up, for example, I agree that, as Matt has brought up in Exodus 21, the Bible is pro-slavery. The problem is, or it's morally permissible, but the problem is that oftentimes with Christians, they'll either say, well, because God said it, it's moral, or God didn't actually mean that, or Moses got it wrong. And I'm saying, well, I mean, because the consensus always was that the Bible was a totally moral book. But now when people study it, they find out that there's actually immoral things in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's like Christians it's like they're rechanging their doctrines in order to try to make the Bible actually appear moral. Like, for example, if the Bible says that rape is wrong, you will have Christians who will try to say, well, no, the Bible doesn't actually mean rape is wrong.
Hang on, you lost me there.
You lost me too.
So first of all, the problems with the Bible have been known forever, and they've been defended. It's one of the reasons why there's the entire model of apologetics, and why there are different views on this. But I'm having a hard time seeing where you're going, especially when you used that last example. So what's the point?
Well, the point I'm making is that, so, for example, there was a pastor who was essentially saying that, as far as slavery is concerned, that, people today, for example, he basically was trying to say that everybody who is saying that the Bible is, says that the Bible is basically saying is pro-slavery. His point is, well, everybody who states that is wrong and they're misinterpreting the Bible. But when I read Exodus 21, I mean, it basically has it as being morally permissible. But his logic is that, well, you have to understand that this is Exodus 21. He was saying is what Moses wrote. That, for example, that this is like God is not the one who's telling Moses to write all of these laws.
I don't know where this is going.
21. So what I was saying was, well, if it's Moses who wrote Exodus 21, then why do people say that the entire Bible is inspired? When clearly they'll say, well, some parts were just written by men with no inspiration from God.
So you would need to ask them. I mean, you're telling us something that, obviously we've observed many, many times that, hey, different people interpret the Bible in different ways. Some people claim they got it right. Some people claim they got it wrong. And there seems to be no way to tell who's right and who's wrong. I mean, we kind of touched on this earlier today.
Liquid.
Okay, I was just calling to bring it up because I just noticed that, to me, there's a lot of, defending on the, and it's not just, for example, the concept of slavery. I mean, for example, you have the whole thing of stoning gays and all this other stuff that I disagree with. But I mean, see, from my perspective, even if the God of the Bible is true, I mean, I kind of agree with your position that I wouldn't worship him just because of all of the moral but questionable things in the Bible. But I would, if there's evidence for me to prove that the God of the Bible is true, I would believe it. But I wouldn't necessarily worship, or neither do I actually even revere a lot of the characters in the Bible, because most of them are pieces of shit, as you've acknowledged, most of the time.
Okay, good sugar bar. But I mean, yeah, I agree with you, and it's problematic. But I don't know how to fix it. When we figure out how to fix it, then Shannon and I will be out of a job.
Yeah, exactly.
Or a volunteer position, anyway.
And we've only got a limited amount of time left, Samuel. So I think we are going to let you go and move on to the next call because there's lots in the queue, and I just took up a lot of time, on the last call. So thank you for calling. Call us back again sometime. See you later. Bye.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, I want to talk to George.
Today
I choose violence. Hi, George. What would you like to talk about today?
Shannon, setting me up. You're the best friend ever.
I'm not. I don't know why you talk to me. Hi, George.
Hey, George.
How you doing? Talk about? I can't wait.
Hi, Sam. Hi, Matt. How are you?
I'm
so
okay.
Excited.
Evidently, you have an issue with something I said, so let's see if we can fix it.
Yeah, I mean, I have a question basically. It's in regards to one statement you made in the previous show, and basically, I'm gonna paraphrase now, and you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, I will.
But you said something along the lines that even if a God existed, you would not listen to what he has to say because he is an evil SOB?
It depends on the God. So actually, we just kind of addressed this just now. Here, I'll make it easy for you. If the God of the Bible is real, and the Bible accurately describes that God, then that God is an immoral thug, and I will believe that he exists, but I won't worship him.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
I have a question. If a God exists and he has an infinite amount of knowledge, doesn't he therefore has an infinitely greater potential to know what right is compared to humans?
So first of all, infinity is not a quantity, so you can't have an infinite amount of something. But if God knows everything, then yes, he knows, but that doesn't mean that he's necessarily good. See, and so if the God of the Bible is accurate and he permits people to own other people as slaves and to beat them, then he's not moral, and I want nothing to do with him.
It also begs the euthypro, too.
I agree with your assertion there that he could know what right is, but chooses to believe to give us the opposite information. But
No, not
What?
Okay, go ahead.
That's a ridiculous statement, surely.
My question is, if a human is confronted with two decisions, one decision to believe whatever God has to say, and one decision to believe whatever a human has to say, and we know that God has infinitely more knowledge or much more knowledge than a human.
We
don't know that.
No. George, you don't know that. You're a human. You don't get to assume that God knows more than you. You would have to be shown that. And unless you're a God, you can't know whether or not God is correct. And so if a God comes to me and says, hey, go kill this other person, my answer is going to be no, fuck off. That's immoral.
Okay, but I'm assuming that we know that, though. I'm assuming that we know that he has
But we know what?
an infinite amount of knowledge.
No,
Okay.
we don't.
That's
We don't.
rubbish.
How could you possibly know that, George? If I come to you and I introduce you to me and two other people, and I say one of us is a God and is all knowledgeable, how could you know whether or not that's true?
Yeah, I agree with you. In reality, we don't know, but this is just theoretical.
No.
Wait, okay, George, let me. I just want to make sure that I understand what you're doing here. So you're saying you're creating a hypothetical that definitionally, you're saying, let's say God exists. Let's say he knows everything.
Yeah.
Let's say morality is
Yeah.
grounded in him. Let's just assume all of that. So we're just going to assume my position is true, and then after we assume my position is true already, answer this hypothetical that assumes my position is true.
That's
Yeah.
exactly it.
You can't. Guess that means my position is true.
No one argues like that.
God is moral. God
No,
knows
you
everything.
are assuming.
God exists. You're saying assume God exists, assume he knows everything, and assume he
No.
somehow told you something was moral. And then a human who doesn't know anything and isn't God said the opposite of that. You'd be stupid to believe the human because God exists, knows everything, and invented morality. So why would you you're creating a false hypothetical in order to prove that your position is true? It's weird.
It's also
I'm not assuming
fallacious.
that God exists. I'm just saying that if
For your hypothetical, you are.
Yeah.
If God exists, is real,
You-
is moral, and knows everything, then
in the
No.
hypothetical, yes,
It
yes.
doesn't.
God damn it, another crazy caller. What is it? George called, I think, last week or the week before and was as ridiculous then as he is now.
That's what you're saying, but I mean, I'm not trying to prove God. Like, I'm just.
No, he's not trying to prove God. He's asserting he exists.
Even when I make it simple,
He-
you are incapable of understanding this. I wasn't saying you were trying to prove God. I was giving you an analogous argument that assumes the very point you're trying to make. The point you're trying to make is that it would be wrong for me to assume that I know more than a God about morality. That is the point you were trying to make. And in order to make that point, would you shut up and let me finish? In order to make that point, you wanted me to assume that there was a God who knows everything about morality.
it's the same as me saying, assume I know everything that's ever. I am the only entity in existence for all of time, me,
Excuse me,
Shannon,
just shut
that knows
down.
anything about morality, and that everything that I say, by definition, is moral.
Yeah.
That
it's
in order
circular
for this
argument.
hypothetical to work. And if I told you something was moral, and then somebody else told you something was moral,
Chat.
you'd be stupid not to believe me.
That's not just me,
'cause
is it?
definitionally,
I mean, George is
make
just being
sure
ridiculous
that
now, surely.
I'm the arbiter of all things moral, to even as the base
Am
premise
I
of
wrong
this
here?
conversation. So no matter what you say, that
Can you give me a yes or a
anything
no?
other than
Is
saying that
George
you agree with
being
me in
ridiculous
this hypothetical is
in the chat?
stupid. So Boom!
It's
Like,
bound
that's
to
not
lose.
a mic drop. You're creating a scenario where you automatically win an argument because you invented a hypothetical where you win by
that's not the case.
definition.
I mean, what I'm trying to do
It's
is
a rhetorical strategy.
Ooh, now
tell us
we've lost this argument
you can
now.
say all
It's
day
all
that's
gone
not what you're trying to
weird.
do. The evidence is there in what you did. You made a circular argument in order to challenge my position, and you lost. So we're going to move on.
Okay.
Hi. That was fun.
So come on, guys. That was crazy. That's just whoa, genderless, guys. Come on, that was ridiculous. It was just absolutely ridiculous. Not quite as ridiculous as the previous caller, who was talking about the idea that consciousness is, well, you know, it's magic. I knew that as soon as he said that, Matt would keep throwing that down his throat. And in honesty, quite rightly, don't say that something is magic, except as a joke, of course. Like, my dog is stunningly cute. Why? I don't know. It's just magic.
What the fuck is the point of
I tell you how serious I am about this too, George. I'm less likely to disagree with Shannon than I am to your God if he's real.
I'm just going to move forward a little bit till we get to the next caller.
Yeah. Putting you on the air. Thanks so much for calling. We apologize. We only have a minute or so, but thank you for waiting all this time.
Hi, Penelope.
Oh, thank you so much for taking my call.
Yeah, you were calling back to let us know how it went on your coming out.
Penelope.
Yeah, so it's kind of bittersweet. So, with the advice of my counselor, I made a video
Oh, wow.
saying how I came out. And in the video, I set my boundaries. And my dad's initial response was pretty good. He was I could tell he.
Well, just a quick one, because in the UK, if someone comes out, then it's normally a reference to their sexuality. But in America, it could be coming out religiously. Is that an option, or does it mean coming out with respect to their sexuality in the US? I always worry about making assumptions about America.
He was upset, but he was like, I'll do my best to try to respect your boundaries and, as good as I could have hoped for. And then we had a follow-up conversation. And in that follow-up, he said that if I had any questions for him about how I got to my position, that he'd love to have that conversation, as if somehow he knows how I became an atheist.
Oh, I don't like that.
I do.
Wow.
No, I don't like that. So that means that he's created a narrative for himself.
You know how I would respond to that? Yeah. Dad, if you have any questions for me about how you became a deluded theist, I'll be happy to explain it.
It may not be the best relationship retention strategy.
Yeah.
No,
I'm happy to give as good as you get. And when somebody comes at you to say, I can tell you why you're an atheist, then I don't see any problem with saying, I can tell you why you're a Christian. Because you didn't understand science, you didn't understand philosophy, you didn't understand epistemology, you don't understand argumentation, you don't understand reasoning, whatever the reason is, or you were terrified of being alone, you were indoctrinated into it, you were fearful of this. We could go on all day, but you know what? The important thing is that I could actually be wrong. So instead of me telling you why you are what you are, why don't you tell me, and then I'll tell you why I am what I am. And you can still make up shit in your head if it makes you feel comfortable. But I'm not interested in you telling me about why I am what I am.
Yeah. I haven't really talked to him much since then, because that's once I realized what he had said, I got really, really angry, and I haven't been able to really have a conversation with him because I'm just like, yeah, no, I don't know how to move forward with this, because I'm just kind of like, fuck you.
Yeah, I get the sentiment. I don't know. I mean, we're past time, and Shannon's got to run. I want to thank you for sharing that. I don't know. I think you're doing fine. I don't think I need to give you advice on how to handle it. You're standing up for yourself, and just keep remembering that this interaction with your dad isn't necessarily going to be what it's like forever.
No.
And that by by interacting slightly differently, maybe a different conversation can happen down the road. But at the end of the day, you need to be comfortable with you. So.
Right. And he's processing too, and he may not be doing it in the most healthy way by the sounds of it. So, yeah, but make sure don't have any conversations that don't fall within the bounds of what you've already established as your boundaries.
Kind of 4 minutes behind the end of the program.
If they've been articulated to him, and he's going.
I'm going to move forward a little bit just in case.
Disrespect. Then.
Project and a number of other organizations. You are not alone. You're not the first person to go through this. And yeah, if you haven't found like-minded people that you can associate with in your area, well, you can move to Austin and come associate with us. We're trying to get as many people here as we absolutely can. Stay safe. We'll see you next week.
Okay, that's the end of the program. Can I just say before you go, if any of you are listening, just as a quick comment here, please take care, stay safe. When you get the opportunity, get vaccinated. Vaccinations are really important. And if you want my opinion on the Guide for Life, then just try to make a positive difference to someone else's life. If you can do that, then that's a pretty good thing. If you happen to like this, then please click like, subscribe, and ring the bell if you're so inclined. And take care, be happy, and do good. It's been good. Take care.